So we actually are on Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, and we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines from the bottom. Who is not here last week?
I wasn't here.
Okay. So last week we talked about borer, and borer is about separating.
By the way, it's interesting. You know that I'm a. Well, you do arbitration, or you don't? Yeah, that's borer. Today, that's the common Hebrew word for
Borer, correct.
Borer is a common
Ze
word for
borer,
arbitrators.
it's called. Zabla v'zabla, ze bor lo echad, v'ze lo bor echad. That's correct. We do that in the basin too, right? Each one chooses one rabbi, and the two choose a third rabbi.
And that's the word that's used in Ivrit for an arbitrator.
Correct.
Yeah, in your modern Hebrew, but it must come from the same.
It comes from rabbinic Hebrew,
Sure.
right? Okay. Yes. So, but that has to do with the fact that they were chosen.
Maybe or because they're two, I don't know, whatever.
But maybe they were the ones to choose the choices between who's right and who's wrong, and to kind of come to some.
Well, here you're choosing the good or the bad, so
right.
it might kind of.
Do you have any printouts?
So I don't have a printout, no, from last week. But here's what I wanted just to tell you about the summarize for last week, okay? Because you need to know something going into this week. Borer is a different kind of malacha than many of the other malachos. It's most malachos create real change in the object. Not every malacha does that. Some malachos are less intrusive to the object that the malacha is being done on, and borer is separating. So you're separating one piece from another piece. And there's a couple of rules about it. So nothing really happens except you have a mishmash. You got a mix, and now you're separating pieces from the mix. So the rule is that in order for borer to be permissible, it has to have the three conditions. One, you have to do it by hand. You can't use a machine. The second thing, it has to be done to use immediately or possibly the next meal. That immediately does not mean right now. Immediately can be for the next meal that's coming up, even that's a few hours away. And the third is that in order to be permissible, it has to be ochel mitoch psoles. You have to take the food away and leave behind the refuse or the disposable. Unless you happen to have a situation where the majority is the food, and you only have a little bit of refuse, right? Let's see, did I get that right? Then you would be taking, then the real way to do it is, do I have it backwards? Let me think now. If I have mostly food, right, in order for me, I have it backwards. In order for me to do it and be permissible, I have to take the food out from the refuse. Unless it's mostly refuse, then I have to take the refuse out and leave the food behind. So, to be permissible on Shabbos, I have to do it in a way that's not normally done.
Right.
So therefore, for example, the example we gave last week, and you may have heard this, is about the watermelon. You can't take the pits out of the watermelon, right? You could take the watermelon out of the pits. But taking the pits out of the watermelon would be taking the refuse, the psolet, and leaving behind the ochel. To be permissible, I have to take the ochel and leave behind the psolet. Because the normal way that you would want to sort is to take away the refuse, which is usually the smaller amount, to leave behind the food. Think of if you had grain and you had some pebbles inside the grain. You'd pull out the pebbles from the grain and leave behind the grain. So the way for it to be permissible is not to do it in the normal way, which if the normal way is to remove the pebbles and leave behind the grain, the way that it is permissible, one of the requirements is to remove the grain and leave behind the pebbles. So ochel mitoch psoles, it has to be done by hand. It can't be done with a specialized machine, and it has to be done for use as quick as possible, or reasonably quick.
But it can be done with a simple object like a spoon or
correct.
a fork.
So it depends. It may depend. It actually may not be permissible to do with an object that's not its own. It may be only a rabbinic prohibition then. So if you, for example, let's say if you're not separating them out, you're not pulling out or the other part is when you put the spoon in, you may be pulling out some of the food together with the psolet. That would also be permissible. To separate one directly from the other is prohibited. To separate both of them together, but less of one and more of the other, is not fully borer. So, for example, if I wanted to pull out the pebble and I had, let's say, a bowl of cereal and I put the spoon in to take out the pebble, and I got a couple of, grains of flour in there, That's not borer because I still have food together with the pebble. Okay, but what the Gemara seems to say, and if we assume that we have to take all this, that the only thing, and you actually will see this in the Gemara today, that and we'll see what actually. Right. So if it's a utensil that's not a specialized utensil for borer, like a spoon, so it may only be a rabbinic prohibition. It may not be a Torah level prohibition. If there may be other reasons to permit it, it might be a sniff in addition to allow it to become permissible. But the Gemara actually gave this example about using specialized equipment and using non-specialized equipment. Something that would be like a coin sorter. You put grain and pebbles into the coin sorter. The coin sorter is going to hold back the pebble, which is bigger, and allow the grain to go through. That's not the same. That's not using the proper machinery for it. Okay. So I said the way we paskin is you need all three. There are other shitos among the Rishonim, you only need one, but the way we paskin, which is found by the Rabbeinu Hananel, and is quoted by the Shulchan Aruch, and is la halacha, that you need all three. One is by hand, one is to do it as quick as possible, or for the next meal, let's say the next meal, and the third one is it has to be separating the ochel from the psolet. Okay, so that's what we did last week, and and the unusual part about the Gemara was they gave various answers, and the way two of the answers can't work because they're not halachically correct. Three of the suggestions are correct. Two of the final three don't fit into the words of the brisa, but they're not rejected because they're halachically incorrect, and therefore we paskin the all last three answers. So having said that, the Gemara is going to pick up a $9 Amud Aleph, and I said it's about 12 lines at the bottom, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, or 13 lines. The first one on line is Nachmeni. Everybody see it? Hayu lefanav shnei mina ochlim.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Gemara now talks about, it's continuing this and giving some examples about borer. Hayu lefanav, and actually there's a brisa, and we have two versions of the brisa. That's how most Rishonim learn this. Some say it's actually it's a brisa, and a brisa that was quoted before. Some say it was two new brisas, but we don't have the full text of them, and you see that creates a little bit of confusion. Hayu lefanav shnei mina ochlim. You have two types of food together. And in this case, shnei mina ochlim would mean to say that it's not just food and psolet, which is non-edible,
right.
Even something you want and something you don't want, even if they're both food, that's also considered relative ochel and relative psolet. Okay? So in other words, I'm trying to think of what kind of example you want. You have blueberries in a pie. And you want it, and you don't want the blueberries. You don't like blueberries, so you're going to take out the blueberries. Blueberries are edible, just you don't like them. That would be borer, because you're taking out the psolet that you don't like the blueberry and leaving behind the cake that's there.
Almonds and peanuts.
Right, almonds and peanuts. There you go. That's right, correct. Pulling out the cashews. Go. Pulling out the cashews. In terms of pulling out the cashews, actually, you are pulling out the ochel. Right, so that would be okay if you're pulling out the cashews and leaving behind the peanuts.
No, but what about Rajikis and mandla?
You have to eat them together. Correct. That's why the kid goes to sleep in the song. Okay, too much. It's the example they're giving is you did borer. Neither you ate it or you put it down. And means you doesn't put it down to put away. You put it down to use in a while. Use a very short while. Means you don't have to pick it up and put it right into your mouth. So Rav Ashi masni potter. Rav Ashi says it's potter, which means potter aval asar. Rav Yirmiyah midifni masni chayev. Rav Yirmiyah says no. Not only it's a pot, it's asar. It's chayev, which means chayev in Torah. So the Gemara asks, which version is it? Or how can Rav Ashi say potter? Rav Ashi masni potter v'otani chayev. How can you say potter? We have the version that says chayev, either this or previous version. But in other words, we have, it looks like to be the same brisa, only one version that Rav Ashi is quoting. It's not his own opinion. He's quoting a brisa. It says potter. And then you have Rav Yirmiyah also midifnis quoting a brisa said the same thing. It looks like, or very similar. It says chayev. So what is it? So the Gemara says lo kasha ha b'kinon v'tamchui ha b'nofel kfara. So the kinoi and tamchui are the non-specific utensils that are not usually used for this kind of separation. Okay, the naf and kfara are a sieve and a sifter. So that's clearly, those are meant for sifting and separating and so forth. So naf and kfara, which are the regular proper utensils, that's also in Torah. The items, the other things which are kinun and tamchoy, which are, I think, I don't remember what they are now offhand. What are a funnel or
Wide plate.
a wide plate? Okay, so the funnel is the one, the same thing like you're doing sorting coins. So you have a funnel. Funnel is really not meant to sort out between different items. It's more to kind of bring liquids together so they don't splash. The same thing with a wide plate, that you can put it out and maybe just tilt the plate so some would come off. So that's not a specific type of mechanism or machinery that would be specific for borer. Therefore, it's only rabbinically prohibited, and that's why it's called potter. So that's what the Gemara says. So even this kind of separation, which, by the way, without going back to last week, was included in one of the previous answers in the Gemara, you see comes up halachically to be correct. Okay. So that's why you see there's a difference between any type of machinery and any type of mechanism. Maybe possibly a spoon is not really considered a machinery. Right? Maybe a cup is like an extension of your hand.
Right, yeah. I heard that, you get the spoon with the holes in it so that you can pick up...
Like a slotted
like
spoon.
a soup, like
a slotted spoon.
That I've heard.
It's okay?
That's specialized.
That is specialized.
Whereas a regular spoon is not is considered, as you said, an extension of the hand.
So a slotted spoon is clearly going to let through these different
Some
items.
things are not
Right, you want to take out the soup and leave behind. You want to take out the
Usually take
vegetables,
out the solids,
and you want to leave behind
the soup,
the liquid.
the liquid.
Right. So that, depending on which is the psolos and which is the ochel, which you want and which you don't really want, could depend whether that would be permissible or not, or that would be considered a specialized equipment. That's a specialized equipment. Using a spoon, and why is it not specialized? Because if you use a spoon, even if you want to take out the vegetables and leave behind the soup, some soup is going to sit in the spoon. Sure. It's part of it not being specialized. It doesn't do a good job.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the case. Okay. So next, now we have a story. Kiyasa Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, we've pointed out many times, Rav Dimi is coming from where? Anybody remember? Well, it's a choice between Bavel or Eretz Yisrael.
I don't remember where he comes from.
He's coming from Eretz Yisrael. Okay, Rav Dimi and Ravasi actually travel back and forth, and they actually learn. When they go to Eretz Yisrael, they're sitting and learning from Rav Yochanan most of the time. So they're bringing back Torah Rav Yochanan to Bavel. So they're a tremendous asset, and you find it many times. When Rav Dimi showed up, because he wasn't there when they're talking about it, but they came and they said, "What did you learn?" So Amar, he says, when I was learning Rav Yochanan's yeshiva, Shab Sod Rav Bibi Havai. And it was the Shabbos. In other words, they had Torah Nut. The yeshiva Bachrim had a rotation of who was going to serve the others, who was going to be the waiters. So this was the Shabbos of Rav Bibi. He was the Meltzar. He was the Toran. On this Shabbat, he was there. V'gloy Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi, and Rav Ami and Rav Asi came and they sat down. And Rav Bibi is going to be the one to serve them. So Shadu Kamayo Kalkala de Peire. He put down in front of them a large basket of fruit. Now, what he didn't do was, he didn't pick out for them which fruits that they write. So it looks like I think it means he actually threw it out. So Rashi says, he shadcham v'heim notlim v'ochlim. Uvishtoch zen nefrosh ha'ocham e'elav. He bought a barrel of fruit, a bowl of fruit, basket of fruit, and he actually put it out on the table. It's a wide basket. It looks like, according to Rashi, he actually put it out, and so the fruit separated, different fruits separated one from the other, or the fruits and the leaves separated one from the other. So what doesn't he do? He's the waiter. He's supposed to be giving good service. He's supposed to set for them what they can eat and make sure they're not getting the junk. So what he doesn't do for them, it looks like he's not doing borer. Right. So that's what happened. V'lo yadana, and Rav Dimi says, and I don't know why he did this. If he thought, which by the way we don't paskin like, that you can't take ochel away from the psolas. We say you can't take ochel away from the psolas, right? Unless the percentages are out of whack. But normally you would take out the ochel, right? Like I said, you would take out the vegetables from the soup and leave behind the soup that you don't want. If you want soup without the vegetables, then you've got it backwards. But or you do want the blueberries, but you don't want the cake because you're watching a diet. So if you take out the blueberries and leave behind the cake, that would be okay. That's all. So it looks like it's not quite sure why he did it this way. Why didn't he give everybody a couple of oranges, or say which orange do you want, or which fruit do you want, and take it out of the bowl and put it in front of them? I don't know if that's why he did it. Or perhaps he just wanted to make it look nice. In other words, when you give a person a portion, you're saying that's all you get to eat. You don't have any choice. On the other hand, if you come to I know for us it's more classy to come to what I call a served meal than to go to a buffet. But when you go to a buffet, you can decide what you want, and you can choose how much, and go back to the buffet. All you can eat buffet. Right? So I don't know if the reason was because he holds that you can't take ochel out of psolas, and that's an Isur Borer, which by the way it is not, or because he simply was acting like a good waiter and throwing the food out on the table for people to choose from the sweet table, the fruit table, as much as they want. And the Gemara doesn't really conclude that. All right, which by the way means that we don't have a proof because it doesn't really tell us what it was, and the Gemara leaves it at the story. It means we don't paskin that ochel mitoch psolas is aser. In fact, ochel mitoch psolas is mutar. Right? So no, it's a funny kind of story because normally it brings stories to prove things. This is a story that doesn't prove things, but by virtue of it's not proving things in the mahalach of coming with a halachic decision, you see the Gemara couldn't reach this decision, which means we assume therefore this is not the reason for it. Okay. Now one more story. Same idea of ochel mitoch psolas. It looks like the Gemara is going out of its way to bring these stories to try to tell you that ochel mitoch psolas is aser. But this story they couldn't prove it, and the next halacha they can't prove it either. Okay, so once again, so here's the case. Haborer turmusin. Turmusin are lupins. Anybody know what lupins are? No. Some kind of bean.
Peas also.
Yeah, but it's not peas. Lupines. It's lupines or I think they're called lupines. What are they translated? Lupines. So lupines, I don't know exactly what it is. It's some kind of bean that grows on some kind of plant. And here's what I know about lupines, because I did look it up once upon a time. They were actually used a lot in the old world, and they were used a lot in South America, where they grew wild. And except that to process lupines, you got to really work hard because the plant and the surrounding things are very bitter. So you've got to cook it and cook it and cook it, which is what the Gemara is going to talk about.
It's like a wolf.
A wolf?
A lupine. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Wolfberries. I don't know.
It's a plant of the pea family.
Right, correct. But I'm not sure what it says there. But here's what happened: when the Spanish came to South America and they conquered it, they had the natives stop using lupines because they found there was too much work for them. So they began using other kinds of peas and legumes that were much easier to work with. And that's probably the end of lupines in Western culture, and have fallen by the wayside. So this kind of lupine is edible, but it really requires a lot of work to take out the bitterness. Okay?
I'm pretty sure I've seen cans
Of lupines?
that says lupine.
Really?
Could be. It's very possible.
Hey. Already in a can, they probably did all the work.
Well, yeah, but I'm not sure if you look in Wikipedia. That's where I looked up everything in Wikipedia. Where else? Okay, but
Oxford Dictionary.
Oxford Dictionary. Well, but it clearly referred to the Spanish as really having done in the lupines for the modern diet. Okay, but you'll see this from the Gemara that this is what we're talking about. So Chizkiah says, "Haborer turmusin mitoch psola sholhem chayav." So Chizkiah says, and it looks like before I told you about this, how much you have to cook and so forth, but it looks ostensibly that if you do borer from lupins and you're taking out the peas and leaving behind the psoles, you're chayav because borer ochel mitoch psoles is chayav. That's what this seems to read initially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Once again, this is the second attempt of the Gemara to try to show you or prove to you that ochel mitoch psoles is aser, is chayav, is wrong for borer, and I've told you already it's not going to work out. Right? So the Gemara says, Lema kasavar Chizkiah ochel mitoch psoles aser. Do you mean to say that the Chizkiah mean to tell us that ochel mitoch psoles is aser? So the Gemara says, no. Shani turmasin, the shalkele shivei zimnei, that you have to cook it 7 times again and again and again. V'ilo shalkile, or v'ilo shalkile, if you don't cook it this many times, masreach, it becomes rotten, becomes smelly. Ukepsolas mitoch ochel dami, and it looks like psolas you're taking out of the ochel. So there's a couple of pshat in Rashi. Neither of them are really that clear. But here's what I think it is. Every time you cook this, you then need to remove the ochel and then cook it again, and then you need to take the ochel out and cook it again. So I've got these lupines in their pods. I cook it and then I remove it. So every time I'm removing it, I'm really not removing ochel from the psolas, because I still have to process it again. So I'm really taking psolet out of ochel. That's how one first approach of Rashi is. Second approach, the second interpretation of Rashi is that let's see now. Every time I do cook them, I take the psolet out when I do the cooking itself. And if I don't do it, it's going to be masriach. So even though I'm really taking ochel from toch psoles, nonetheless, there's a special case that really it's considered like psolet mitoch ochel. And Rashi even says that when I take out the food, when I take out the good part, sometimes in my hands it becomes rotten. It becomes too soft and too mushy, and I've got to throw it away. So even though the bottom line is, I can't really try to understand this fully clearly, but this is a special case where when I'm taking the ochel out of the psolas, because it requires a process to cook and recook, and I've got to change the water every time, the ochel is really the psolet, and the psolet is really the ochel. So even though it looks like ochel mitoch psolas, it's psolas mitoch ochel because of the process.
Are you doing all this on Shabbos?
No, I'm between cookings, I'm separating it. I'm not cooking it on Shabbos, but between the cookings, I have to cool it down and then separate and toss the water and separate to the next thing. So this is a process that takes a long time. So I may not even be able to finish it on Shabbos. So let's say I cooked it on Friday, so I can't cook anymore, but now I want to separate this to prepare for the second recook. So I've got to remove parts of the what's ochel out.
That's hachana in any event.
Yeah, okay. I don't have an answer for that. It's a very complicated kind of thing. Okay, so it might be besides all the other things, you're going to be chayav for the actual borer part of this. Right? I said I've gotten to as best as I can. So even though we're taking ochel because from psoles, we're really considered from psoles mitoch ochel. Okay. So let me see. Rashi says you have to cook it once. You pour the water out. And then you take out, after you pour the water out, you have to take out the wormy ones. And even the good ones can be wormy. And then I have to do it again and again and again. And if I don't cook it again, it's going to become masriach. So therefore, the moment that I cook it twice or three times, what looked like that I'm taking the ochel out can still become the psolas. So I'm really taking the psolas out of the ochel. That's how Rashi understands it. Okay.
Very special case.
In other words, the bottom line is whatever it looks like, it's not ochel mitoch psolas. It's not your standard ochel mitoch psolas case, and therefore the second attempt of the Gemara to try to prove that ochel mitoch psolas is aser, is chayav, and borer has been shot down.
Right.
And the Gemara leaves it at that point. So the good news is, as long as you're not working with turmasin, you can take the ochel from the psolas. Okay, but you can't take the psolas from the ochel. Okay.
Back to the watermelon, that's a problem.
The watermelon, exactly right. The watermelon will be the problem. The watermelon, to take out the pits and leave behind the watermelon fruit, or not fruit, whatever it is, meat. The pulp, the meat, is a standard case that comes up most frequently in terms of borer. Okay. The other part about borer is you have to do it right before the meal or before the next meal. Okay.
Or if there's a tray and you take away all of the
nuts
you don't want, and you just
correct.
And you finally take the cashews you want. That's a classic borer because you're removing everything that
you remove the part you don't
want.
Right. Well, actually,
it's not the bad part. It's just you don't want.
You're taking the good part, but you're taking the cashews is the part you want the cashews.
Well, he said take out the other parts.
That's the opposite. You're not eating that. First, you're removing everything to get.
Right. Okay. So you want to take away all the bad stuff to eat. You leave behind just the cashews.
Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You're the host. You're the host. You want to put out the nuts. And you want to keep the cashews for yourself. So you take all the stuff, all the peanuts out.
If you're a guest, let's say you're a guest at a simcha.
Right. Correct. Right.
Have the whole table of.
Right. But once again, if you scatter them out, then it wouldn't be borer. If you scatter them out, see, like the case we had before Rav Bibi, he took all the fruit and put the fruit out on the table. He took the basket and put the basket, and it all rolled out. So then, in other words, it's not a borer if I have an orange here and I have an apple here, or I have an orange here and I have a rotten orange here. I'm not separating them; they're separate.
But I want to make if we have, I have 3 kinds of nuts. I got some almonds, I got some peanut, and I got some cashew. They're all mixed together in a bowl.
Right,
and I want cashews.
Yes.
So that to me, if I take them, that's ochel mitoch, what I consider solid.
Yes, if you're going to take the cashew and you're going to eat the cashew, yes, that's ochel mitoch psolas. You're doing it biyad.
Yeah.
Ochel mitoch psolas. You're doing it biyad, and you're doing it to eat right away. That's fine.
Perfect.
The issue would become what if you don't want to eat the cashews now? Yeah. You want to make sure the cashews are there for you later. So you separate the peanuts and put them back in, and then you can leave those behind. That's where the issue would be. Right. That's the issue. So yes, you can dig in and pull out the cashews. Okay. All right. So that's about the malach of borer. Okay. Back to the Gemara now. Now we have a new piece of Gemara. Okay, is this pretty good? Even for those who weren't here last week, you have the idea. Okay. Hatochen. Okay, tochen is grinding. So grinding actually is not only going to be for grain. Grinding can be for many other things as well. And it can even be for items that are not food items. And it's talking about with the process. Every malacha has we talk about pu'ula and a tachlis. The action and the purpose, right? The reason for grinding is to make into smaller pieces, right? There's a number of siftings and sortings, one of which is borer, one of which is marakeh. But the idea to make into smaller, more small pieces is something that is unique for the malach of tochen, and that's the purpose behind it, right? So you're actually going to make small pieces, and the purpose is to make it smaller and more edible. So Amrav Papa. Haiman the parim silka chayev mishum tochen. So silka, so discussion we've shown is a parim or paris, by the way. So don't think that only your handwriting was poor. Okay. So but paris and parim means the same thing. It means to cut into very small pieces, to dice it up. And the silka is beets. Okay. Or what else would it be? Beets. It's beets. Someone's going to say something else? No? So,
celery?
No, it's not celery. It might be spinach, but I think silk in the days of the Gemara is beets. Okay, so a person who diced up these beets, chayev mishum tochen, is going to be chayev because of tochen. And actually, Tosfos points out that it is specifically this type of vegetable that's going to be tochen, but other types of food is not going to be considered tochen. I'm not sure why. I think it is because beets are very unique. They're hard, right? Most vegetables.
Cooked, yeah.
Well, even when they get cooked, you still got to cut them up. It's very hard to eat a full beet.
Yeah.
Right. Even carrots, sometimes you have sliced carrots or diced carrots or diced
Sure.
right. But beets are very, very hard. They grow in the ground and surely before they're cooked and so forth. So it would not be. So part of the processing would be the same way that you're not going to eat wheat kernels, you want to grind them up, so you'd want to come grind up the silka. So chay mishum tochen. Okay, so the question. I'm just saying that every time you have a grinding situation, you have to determine is it going to be considered tochen, or you're just simply making it into smaller things. So, for example, if you were to grind, what about other vegetables? What if you grind it into, very tiny salad? I don't know. It seems from Tosfos and some of the other Rishonim, it's very specific to silka or some other things that were very unique about grinding them into small things.
Before they're cooked.
There was a few years ago in Yerushalayim where the mashgiach found one of the workers chopping up, I think it's the parsley or something, and said, you can't do that, this on Shabbos, you can't do that. And the mashgiach insisted that this worker be fired. And that was the issue, which was it was in all the newspapers at the time. Big fuss.
So I think somehow, and I don't remember where I know this from, but tchina is also only permissible if you do it right away before the meal. Okay, so some other malachas also have the same thing like borer, which is only done miyad or lialter. So therefore, in fact, the issue would come up if you are dicing like an Israeli salad. So you do the Israeli salad before you sit down to the meal, or close to sitting down to the meal. You couldn't make the Israeli salad first thing Shabbos morning for Shalosh Shudas. Okay.
So it's okay to do it.
Right. Correct. Right. So So that maybe that was the case there, or maybe parsley would be different. Maybe parsley is different. I don't recall.
But if you have like cooked potatoes,
yeah.
So this
it's not just cutting. You're cutting into extreme. So now, what about mashed potatoes?
Well, even let's say even cooked potatoes. I have a piece of potato. I can cut it with my fork or whatever.
Yes, you can. Correct.
Right?
Yes. Right.
So that's not.
But
like
can you make it into mashed potatoes? That's a discussion among the Achronim, I remember, because is really mashing it when it loses shape consistently, is it going to be considered like tachin or not, or something like mashed bananas?
Yeah.
Okay, I know it comes up in the discussion.
Yeah.
An egg is you can't chop up an egg.
You can't chop up an egg.
You can't make an egg salad on Shabbos.
Right. I think it's also about tachina. I think it's about tachina too.
Sounds like tachin.
But yeah. But I believe you do it right before it's permissible. I'll double check. Okay. So Haiman the Solis says that's one is about Solis Parim Silka. Rav Menashe Haiman the Solis Silsa. Okay, Chaim Mishim Tochen. Now Solis Silsa is cutting up little matchsticks, little matchwoods, little small chips of wood into small pieces of wood. Okay, so in other words, it's called Tochen because you have this tiny kindling wood, kindling chips, and you're cutting it into very small pieces. So I'm not like almost like sawdust, I guess, somehow. But you're making it into very small chipped wood that you're going to use to get the fire going. So you're taking twigs and chopping them into smaller things. Think of matchboxes, those kind of pieces of wood. Well, now, matches are actually this type of cutting is going to trigger possibly another kind of malacha. Ravashi, or mashchasa, if you're concerned about how big they are, you're concerned about the actual measurement of what you're cutting down, like matchboxes, like matches, chayiv mishum mechatech. You're chayiv not only because of tochen, you're chayiv because of, or maybe mechatech, which is when they would cut the skins in the hides into certain shapes. That was one of the malachas.
Right.
So as we see when we have these toldos or sometimes drabanans, they get extended. So even though the idea of mechatech was cutting the hides into specific shapes or whatever the hides were going to cover over the Mishkan, nonetheless is going to apply to other things as well, including, as it does here, in edibles, such as matchsticks that would be cut into specific sizes. So if you're careful about how you cut it, which the matches are an example in the matchbox, that would be the malach of mechatech as well as tochen. Okay, so now, okay, so that's really about tochen. Not much more to talk about tochen at that point. Okay. Okay. Next is going to be which malach is coming up now? Halash va'ofer. Okay. Okay. Let me just see something here. Okay, so he quotes here from this is this Sefer Yosef Dasser sometimes used. He quotes here about silka, that this is the way to because this is specifically the way to do it. That's why it's a process of tochein. Most other things they didn't call cut that small. And he says v'yesh b'farshim dafka b'yerek she'en nechol k'mo shehi. You can't. It's a type of vegetable you don't eat full. And therefore, you have to make it small before you can be able to come to put it into to cook it itself. Okay, and that's the Tosas Rush and others say that is about porous silka, cutting the so it may only be the silka, the selek. And the second thing, it's specifically this because you can't eat it as it is. And one more. Kasva Rashba b'tshuva, quotes b'tshuva Rashba, lo asvu prima silka, el b'mechatech, here's where it is, mechatech lecho mocho leachashah, where I'm dicing it to eat tomorrow. Tomorrow means from Friday night to Shabbos morning, or after an hour. Aval lecho le'alter mutar. But if I want to eat it right away, it's permissible, k'mo linyan borer. V'yesh cholkem al kach, and some say, some disagree. V'kasav Beis Yosef, the Beis Yosef is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, shemutim min adin. Okay, and it's permissible. Umikol makom, he's quoting now the Rashba, I guess, or he's quoting someone else. Nachon lasos hasalad mechatichas gedolos ksas v'yoshirchlu la'alta. You shouldn't make it tiny diced salad, but a little bigger, and you should eat it right away. Okay. And he says he quotes here also from Mincha Shlomo and the Igros Moshe that you can cut snon, which is radishes, and malafafon, which is cucumbers, and to prusos stakos miod. It doesn't apply to these kinds of things, which can be eaten, I guess, as they are. Right? You can eat radishes. Okay? So So those are examples of tochin. So I believe the case with the mashgiach probably was where the worker was working to tice up his parsley or celery or whatever it was for much later in the day. Back to the Gemara. Halash v'ofer. This is about a person who is. Did I skip something? No. This is about kneading and about baking. Now, this was the listing, and I pointed this out to you already, that the first 11 malachas deal with what's called Sidur de Pas, which is the order of baking bread. Even though in the Mishkan, in preparing for the Mishkan, they didn't really prepare for the bread was done on an ongoing basis. Lechem apanim. What did they use for really preparing the Mishkan, for getting the Mishkan going? They were really cooking dyes, planting dyes, cooking dyes. So and the Mishnah, on the other hand, gave the order of what's called Sidur de Pas. So the Gemara here simply reflects on this. Amrav Papa, Shavak Tana Didan, Bishul Samamanim, David B'Mishkan. Our Tana of the Mishnah left off, or elided, or skipped over, or no, left out really, left behind the cooking of the samanim, the dyes, which were in the Mishkan, and Nakanofa, and listed the process for baking. So the Gemara said, Tana Didan Sidur de Pas Nakad. So the Tana gave the order of baking bread. Now that answers the question without really answering the question, okay? Because that's where what the question is. So the answer is because it wanted to put it in a way that people could relate to it more directly. The types of malachas that come to prepare bread was something people were very familiar with. They didn't buy flour in the store; they had to go do the process of grinding and kneading and sifting and planting and so forth. So it put it in a way that's the basic staff of life. Even though really there are used malachas which are used for samamanim. Now there is no lush, there is no kneading for samamanim. So the answer is that in terms of mixing in, I think we mentioned this, if you mix in the food or the item or the dye into water, into liquid, that is considered, then you stir it around, or even not stir it around, that would be considered lush. So in the same way that lush is taking the flour and mixing water into it and kneading it, right, just the mixing it alone is going to actually make a be lush. Okay? Okay. We have a bread machine. And one time, recently, because I had to get a new machine, the bread machine broke. The drivers for the paddles broke. So, fortunately we found it fairly quickly. But basically it didn't really go through the kneading process. We re-kneaded it. My wife tried to knead it as much as she could by hand after I'd sat for a while. It was not fully kneaded. It was not the best bread, but it was edible bread. So you can know the point of it being you can eat bread if you simply mix water and yeast into the flour without fully kneading it together. That's what I'm trying to show you. So the same thing is, kneading itself is a process of adding water so that the bread or the dough will begin to ferment. And by the way, as you realize for matzah, you don't necessarily have to put yeast into it as well. And the same thing would be for the salmonim. So the Gemara's real answer is, yes, you're right, but we gave a synonym or a parallel process because that's what people are more really familiar with. But everything that we have in the process of Sidur de Pas, we're going to have in the process of Bishul Samamonim. Amaravacha bar Rav Avira. Haiman the Shadi. So what are we talking about now? We're talking about Ofer or Bishul. Okay. How would you define, by the way, the action for Bishul or Ofer? And what is the purpose for it? This is tricky. Because you say it's cooking.
Yeah.
What does cooking mean?
Usually, I guess softening. Well, I'm trying not.
Well, for cooking, it's softening, right? Cooking is softening. What would happen if you're baking it? It actually becomes harder, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's the cooking really has to do with the fact that it remains in the water. So you're actually changing consistency. You're doing two things. One is you're changing consistency. Part of that is happening because you may be denaturing the proteins. You may be cooking out some of the other carbohydrates, mixing things together, but the consistency changes. And also you've reached a final product that's more edible or usable than the previous product. Like whether it's wheat or dough to bread, let's say dough to bread, or whether it's the raw ingredients in soup that come out as a soup that are cooked together. So the Gemara gives a very funny kind of case. And once again, a lot of these malachas look like they deal with edible items, but they may apply as well to non-edible items. So the Gemara says as follows. Look at this case. This is really unusual. Haiman the shadi sichna liatuna chayev. If you take a peg, like a piece of wood, and Rashi says yated. Yated is like a stick, right? As in yated neman, right? The rod. It's a rod, okay? Comes from the Tanakh. But yated means a rod, a stick, a pin, a wood pin, and you put it into the fire. You put it into the atuna, to the fire, and the purpose of putting it into the fire is to do what?
Make the fire.
You're actually, what do they call it? Kilning it. You're curing it. What's the process for it? When you buy wood in the lumber yard, it's called kiln dried. Right? What a kiln is a hot oven, and they do it properly so that the wood dries in a uniform fashion. Because otherwise, if you use wood that's wet, as it begins to dry, it's going to dry and warp. Because you can't control the conditions once you put it out on the fence and when you put it in your wall. Kiln dry means that the panels of wood that you're going to use are going to stay what they are. But the bottom line is, if you want to use wood, you don't want to use live wood that's damp because it has to dry out, it won't dry uniformly. You want to use dried wood. So you put this piece of rod into the oven on Shabbos. Your purpose was to make it hard. Okay? So the Gemara says, you're chayav because of mavashel, because of cooking. So now the Gemara says, well, pshita, well, yeah, I put it into the fire. Well, so the Gemara says, wait. Mahu desema l'shrurei manakam achavein. So you thought that you're putting it in there to dry. And drying is not really bishul. The process of bishul is going to make it softer, right? Ofa is more going to make it harder, but bishul is going to make it softer. So you're really putting it in there to harden it. Kamash malan de mirpei rafi v'hadar kamit. First the wood gets soft. And I'll tell you how I think I understand this. First the wood gets soft before it gets hard. What I believe happens in the kilning process, and this makes sense to me. I've never seen a kiln, but the moisture in the wood is going to be pulled out to the surface. Like any type of heat. What do? It begins to evaporate. Before it cooks, some of the moisture comes out. So the moisture inside the wood, inside this live piece of wood, or inside this green piece of wood, is going to be pulled up to the surface, and as the water comes up, the moisture comes up, it's going to very, very extremely short period of time make that part of the wood soft. That's an extremely short period of time, maybe seconds, microseconds. And then once it evaporates from the center and pulls it up to the surface and begins to bleed off the top, it cooks it off. So then the wood gets hard and uniformly hard in the kiln. But the part of it is, at some part in the process, the water will get to the surface of the wood, and that'll make that part of the wood softer. So therefore, as an extension, or toldo, it looks like, of this bishul, this is going to be putting the wood into the oven to kiln it, even though at the end it gets hard, but still at one point, the mirpei rafi, first it gets soft, hadar kamit. Okay? So this is a tolda of, it looks like it's a tolda of bishul, but it's not edible.
What's kamit mean again?
Hard. It gets like shrinked up. It gets shrinked up. It gets hardened. So okay, Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Haiman the artich kufra, person who heats up. This is like tar or pitch. Chayav mishum avashel. So he's going to be chayav because of bishul. Now, what are you doing with tar? If you ever seen them tar the roads, it's pretty simple, right? You soften it up and you smear it out. So what happens when you smear it out on the ground, or what happens when you take the heat away from the tar? It becomes hard, right? So Gemara says pshita. Well, yeah, but I'm cooking it up. I understand why I'm mavashel. So Ma'al the same. I came in the hadav kisha. I may have thought that seeing at the end it becomes hard at the very end. So therefore, emolo, it's not going to be considered bishul. Bishul is where I cook something and it stays soft. Right? So I could think that this is not really bishul. It only gets bishul temporarily. When it gets soft, when I heat up the tar, the moment I take away the heat, it doesn't become soft. I have soup and I leave the soup and it cools down. The soup is still going to be soft. I have meat and I cook the meat out and I put the meat in the water. The meat is going to be soft. So kamash malan, nonetheless, it tells me that it's considered a malacha of bishul. Okay, so far so good. Yes, all of these are examples one after the other. Amarava. Okay, now this is about how to count the various dams all together. Okay, the Gemara is going to give us 3 examples where you're going to, actually 4 examples, where by doing this act and making this object, you're going to be over 7 chatos, 8 chatos, 11 chatos, and 13 chatos. All I can tell you about these numbers is they are the amount of knots, the amount of windings that you normally have on tzitzis. Right, 7 windings, 8 windings, 11 windings, 13 windings. I don't know how that comes together, what kind of gematria it's trying to tell you. But they are what they're building here are items that were fairly common. And then you just had, the Gemara doesn't tell us what the 7 are, you have to count them up in Rashi. Haiman di'avid chavita. A person who is making a chavit. A chavit is a barrel. Now barrels are not made of wood, barrels are made of clay. Surprise. There are no wooden barrels, as you know, a keg of beer, or a barrel of beer, or a barrel of whiskey, or wine. There are no. The barrels that they talk about, the chavit that they talk about, are all earthenware. Okay? They did not invented barrels in the time of the Mishnah and Talmud. Okay, not wood barrels at least. Yeah. No.
I believe it. Hey, I believe it. So on Shabbos, this fella is making barrels.
So he's making jugs. He's making
small barrels, whatever.
He's making barrels out of clay.
Right on Shabbos. He thinks this is a good job.
Well, he needs it done. It's got to be done. Okay, he's doing it. The question is, there are multiple averos, or multiple chatos, multiple malachos that he's doing. So when he makes this barrel from beginning to end, he will have done 7 different malachos. Okay. Now we'll just do one more, then we'll try to count them up. So Haimanas the Mavid Chavita Chai Mishum Sheva Chatos. By the way, people don't know there are no wood barrels. There's something that's surprising when you tell people that. Tanura, if you're making a tanur, which is a clay oven, okay. So how many is that? Mishum Shmona Chatos. You get 8. There's one more part of the process which will be finishing off the oven that you'll see as an 8th object. So let's see if we can figure out what the 7 are. I don't know if you want to do the Rashi. There's a Rashi that counts them up beginning on the short lines, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines in the short, and the short lines in Rashi, or actually 8. Sheva chatos. Okay? Let's see if I can figure them out. Tochen or regavim v'shochakam hatev havitochen. You have the clay, and you've got, looks like ridges, and you're going to smooth up the clay and make the clay finer, it looks like. And when you put it, so Rashi says the first one is tochen, which is going to be considered like grinding it. You're grinding off the ridges of this clay that you're putting together. This looks like, or maybe it's the clay material that you're actually trying to do the tochen on. Okay? Next one is borer. Borer hatzuros hagasos mitocham. You're taking off the large, it looks like stones that got mixed into the clay. You're separating out the pebbles from it, mitocham. That's going to be borer. That's 2. Umarakdan benafeh, and you're going to sift them with some kind of sifter. You have to sift out whatever clay there is that is you're now working with. Umagabel, and then I guess this is while it's still dry. Okay, so I guess the first few on the ridges are probably the ridge of the raw clay that still has not been mixed in properly. Then you're magabel atit. Then you're going to need this mortar that's coming from the clay to make the chavit, the hainu lush, which is lush. We just did that kneading. Umamareh chatit kisheose hagolam sheyechalak, and you're going to smear the this mortar when you make the shape of the barrel of the jug to make it flat, which is going to be mamachek. Mamachek is a malacha that comes up later on with skins, where they would smooth down the skins. Umavir saor, and then you're going to light the fire, bekivshon, in the furnace, where you're going to now, what do we call it? Kiln, not kiln, cure it. What do I mean cure? Fire. I'm going to fire this jug. Umitzarfo betocha. I put it in there. Mitzarfo is to fire it up to make it, give it strength, to make it solid. Hare mavashel. So making the fire and putting it in there is going to be considered mavashel and mavir. So and now I have 7. Do I have 7? Okay, good. Then Rashi says, I don't have the chiyuv, the malacha of chofer, of digging, because I had to dig out the earth, the clay, to begin the process. Why don't I have that? Because Rashi says the only time that I'm chayiv min Torah for digging, we had this before, when I want the hole.
Right.
I don't want the hole. I'm digging out the clay. So really, min Torah, I'm not going to be chayiv this malacha. So you get a freebie. You're not chayiv for a chofer. So you got 7. So these are the 7 if you're going to make a clay jug. a clay barrel, as we would call it. Now, the tanur has one more step. Remember, it's a clay, think of this as a clay laffa oven. Right, so you're making the oven. It's a self-standing oven. So that has number 8. Rashi says that after after you fire it into a bigger kiln, you have some kind of something they smeared on the outside, I believe, that was thick, and it was some kind of insulating material that allowed the heat to stay in, v'hu gemar malacha. And this is what's called the final gemar malacha. And you will remember the last malacha that there is called makah b'patish. So anytime you do something that finishes off and completes it, even though the item was really usable before, that's called the makah b'patish. So you now have this last one, and Rashi continues, kol moedet avi gemar malacha, chai mishum makah b'patish. Okay, so that's about the oven. Now the question is, you're probably wondering how come there's no makah b'patish for making the barrel. So Rashi says, if you're still with me on the second long Rashi, you have a gabi chavis leka mishum makah b'patish. You don't have a makah b'patish. Because once you put the jug into the oven and you fire up the oven, you put the jug inside, that's the final piece. And that's going to be a malacha of mavashil. So you can't say it's mavashil and another malacha. Makah b'patish means I've done the malacha, and now I'm putting on the finishing touches. There is no finishing touches. When the jug comes out, when the barrel comes out of the big oven, it's been fired up, it's fine, it's usable. The oven that you're making, that you're firing up inside this bigger oven, when you take it out, you need to put an additional type of insulating material that's thick and absorbent and so forth. Okay? So that's 7 and 8. Now, Abaye says, Haiman the Ovid Chilta, Chayev achatas vechatos. Chilta, Rashi says, is a kaveret. Kaveret shakonim. Anybody know what a kaveret is? A kaveret is a beehive. Okay, but this is not a beehive for bees. Anything that was upside down. I think we had this about carrying.
We did have.
Right? You threw it, and either fell down or it fell upside down.
Right.
So a kaveret is a term that's used for any kind of basket that has a round bottom that looks like a beehive. Okay, so you have this kaveret shakonim which you're actually using and making and weaving together. So then, if you make this, you're going to be chayiv 11. And if you then sew on a lip around it, excuse me, chayiv 13 chatos. After you make this upside down beehive contraption, you now have a rim around it on the bottom or the top, depending how you hold it. That'll make you 2 more. Okay, should we take a look at Rashi? Because otherwise you won't be able to count them. Okay. Chayiv Yud Aleph. This is the end of the second long line of Rashi. Chayiv Yud Aleph. So Rashi says, what are they? Zomer Hakonim. You're going to prune the reeds. They're made of reeds, and reeds grow fairly quickly, and you've got to cut them back. But the more you cut them back, the more that they're going to grow more. So, or maybe not. Actually, you're going to cut them back. It's not important about cutting more. Well, maybe it is, because it's going to be note as well. So, Zomer Kanim, you cut back, you prune the Kanim, the reeds, Vutzarach Lahem, and you need them. Chai Mishum Kotzer, you chai because of Kotzer, which is harvesting. Umishum Noteya. You chai for planting, because by cutting them down, you're causing them to grow more. So now you got 2. Asfam Yachad, if you collect now the reeds that you've cut back, you've cut down in the swamp, right? Harezam Amar, this is bundling. That's 3. Birer Yafos, now you take out the good reeds and the junky reeds you leave behind, the throwaways, right? Hareza Borer. Okay, Hechlikam, you now need to smooth them out. I'm not sure exactly how these reeds look like and what they look like afterwards, but then that becomes the next one, which is Mamachik, which is smoothing, which they use initially for skins. We had it before. Awesome Dakos, me'achas shtayim o shalosh. If they made them small, in other words, you have these very long reeds. I don't know what the reeds exactly are, but we once went to the Royal Botanical, not the Royal Botanical Gardens, the Botanical Gardens in Niagara Falls, near where the Butterfly Conservatory is, and in one of those areas they had like biblical kinds of produce. So they had the highest, what they used for hyssop. The hyssop they had a number of other things, and they had the reeds of Moses. Okay, the bulrushes of Moses. These are humongous. I mean, I stood next to them; they're like 20 feet tall. When they talk about like they being hidden in the bulrushes, it's real. This is like bigger, taller than his room, right? So, so at any rate, so you're now going to cut these down into smaller pieces. So that's tochen. So that's called tochen. Chadcham b'midah. Now, if you cut them into exact shapes, so you probably had these big reeds, you cut them down into like say 2 or 3. If let's say it's 10 feet high, you now cut them down to 3 or 4 feet each. But then you still need to make them into exactly the same size because this is a quality piece of material that has to be sewn up or tied up in a certain way. So you cut them b'midah, harei ze mechatech. You now have you cutting them in the malach of mechatech. Heisich hashesi harei ze meisich. Now I'm not going to get into this specifically. This is about the warp and the woof. So the way that you make this kind of basket, you need to kind of weave together the round part on the bottom, and then you need to start putting in the different reeds that go up, and you've got the horizontal ones. So it ends up being a few malachas for oreg. One is called mesach. This is setting the warp of the woof. Orag is achas lamala ve'achas lamata. This is about weaving, which is the same thing in a weaving machine, one above and one below. K'nei lahamido harei oseh shtei batei nirim. You do oseh shtei batei nirim, which is one of the other malachas for weaving. Orag harei za oreg. This is oreg, and then chatach lachar arigasam. After you wove them together, you need to cut them down at the very end to make them all finish at the same place. Harei za makbeh patish. So you probably have these loose reeds hanging out. When you get to the top of it, you want to all cut them down and make them straight. So that's going to be the last piece, which we told you is makbeh patish, which is the finale, the final finishing touches. So that's going to be considered makbeh patish. So that's about. If you're going to do just make the kaveret, that's 11. We'll assume that the number is correct, okay? If we didn't count them. Rob, you counted them? Yeah. Go give. Thanks. Pay you later, okay? Oh, you got a picture on the bottom. The picture of the thing? Right, okay, good. Right. So then, so that's about making the actual kaveret. V'ichayti lapume, and if you build a lip upon it, right? Lasot lo safa. So what have you done here? Hosif kan tofer. You got sewing that goes with it, because the rim is basically going to be the same thing as making this kaveret, except that you need to sew it together, v'kosher, and tie it together. Shesarach likshar la'echar hatfira. So that's 2 more that you would add. Then Rashi says, "Mishum bona lekel chiyuve lo b'chaves v'lo b'tana v'lo b'kaveres." Rashi says, really asking the question, why don't we include bona? Like I'm building something. We left that one out. So Rashi says that's not because they ain't binyan b'kelim. Rashi is a rule that comes up. It's not always clear how this is applied, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But this rule ain't binyan b'kelim. You can do a lot of other things with kelim, but binyan is about building something that's attached to the ground. A kelim which is detachable, right, which is detached, I should say, which is freestanding, may not apply to binyan. The question is, what happens if you had one, you rebuild it, does it apply, doesn't apply? It's a very long discussion. Then binyan b'kelim, and mafshid is skinning. So lekal amemer b'kanim, you can't say that's about kanim as well. They have shata ela ba'ar. The malacha of mafshid, which is skinning, is really only about skins, right? And is not going to be applicable. V'yesh, so that's also not included. V'yesh mefarshim, just do one more line, right? 1.5 lines. Rashi v'yesh mefarshim shekodech nekavim ba'etz shetochnim bo harkanim shel shesi mechai misham tochen. Rashi says some people had an idea that you would kind of drill, it looks like you're drilling a hole in the tops of the reeds to kind of put them together, make sure they stayed. And Rashi seems to feel that drilling was considered like tochen. I'm not quite sure exactly. And Rashi says, you're not really doing tchina, you're just trying to kind of attach them in some way. Rashi says, possibly if they want to consider tochen, you'd have to say it's the same way salas silta, which was the case we just had before. Salas silta was where you kind of cutting the sticks into small pieces. Maybe that would be part of a malacha as well. But anyway, this will get you up to 13 different kinds of malachas, which is really brought here because we haven't done all these malachas in detail yet, but at least we've done some of them, including lush, including tochen, including borer. And here's an example of where you can actually be chayav for many malachas building one item. So the point of it being, you actually, as we've seen before, sometimes you can do 2 malachas for doing one act. Right. In this case, there are multiple pieces of building. You don't say it's one malacha, you made one thing. Each part, each shlav, each segment of this includes a separate different malacha. Okay, so that really is this piece. There are some other variations in how to count 7, 8, 11, and 13 in the Rishonim, but pretty much 99% or 95% is exactly like Rashi says. 1 or 2 there's some disagreements about, but we'll leave them on the side for now.
And what's good about it is, if you were warned, you'd be executed, so you'd have to worry about all these. Would be 13 different things, right?
Well,
you only have one
There's a
punishment.
story I heard from
Well,
my town.
I just want to say one thing, just to bring this down to reality. The Gemara talks about chatos. The Gemara assumes that you would have forgotten that you couldn't do it, and you remembered afterwards when they told you. So if they warned you, then it's amazing. But the case is chatos, and then you realize how many chatos you have to set up. Okay, yes.
The story I heard from Rabbi Town, one of the Gedolim from the 19th century was walking through town with his Gabbai, with his Hasidim, and they see there's a Jewish shoemaker who's open on Shabbat. And the Rebbe is looking in, and then he walks into the store, and he goes to the shoemaker and says, look, sir, I've been watching what you're doing, and the way you're making the shoes, you're over on 7 malachas. Now, if you were to do the work this way rather than that way, you'd only be over on 5 malachas.
Just, the story about Yisrael Salanter and Danzig told the longshoremen on Danzig not to smoke on Shabbos. They were there working on the ships. He says, I want at least be makabel not to smoke on Shabbos. You remember it's Shabbos. Okay? There you go. There you go.